The biggest thing that I have trouble overlooking is the Rams' last game against the Eagles. And the way that the Rams gave up a ton of yards to Saquon Barkley. What was it?
Yeah.
Over 250 yards, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And the Eagles won that game 37-20, 255 yards on the ground. Can you overlook that? Like we talked about last segment, how some of these games earlier in the season, you don't give them too much credence, but that's a hard stat to overlook.
It is. Look, Saquon's going to get his. He's too good not to. But also, 200-yard games in the NFL are rare. Super rare. Right. I mean, that's why they stand out. So I guess the reason why I'm saying that is, would I really expect in a playoff game for Saquon to drop more than 200 again? No, I don't. Like, Saquon is going to be Saquon. He's too talented not to have his moments. But I'm not of the belief that Saquon is going to go for 2 bills against the Rams just because he did it earlier in the season. If he does, then you know what? Tip of the cap. You just take a bow and say, you're the man. I feel like the Rams are a different team. Their defense has gotten a lot better. I think the Rams can keep this close, and maybe I'm wrong, but ultimately, and I like the under in this game. That's my favorite play. I don't want to pick a side. I think the under is the right way to go here. But when you look at that Rams defense, I mean, teams change. Like, look at the Ravens defense, for example. It was much maligned earlier in the year, right? This was one of the worst secondaries in the National Football League. Now, they haven't played the greatest schedule recently, but all of a sudden, the Ravens, at least from what we've seen over the past month, one of the best defenses in the NFL, almost a top 10 defense. Look what the Rams have done over their last few games. They have held opponents to 10 points or less in 5 of their last 6 games, and they've won 6 straight. So I think Saquon will get his. Do I think he's going to go for 200 against the Rams again? I don't think so.
I think what worries me the most about that is not that I think Saquon's going to go for 200 again. It's that the takeaway is it feels like the Eagles are a much more physical team than the Rams. And PJ was bringing this up on Tuesday, I believe, that when you can physically exert whatever you want to do with the line of scrimmage, it makes it really tough for the other team to win. And I understand that the Rams have Matt Stafford. And if any team is equipped from playing from behind, maybe it's the Rams. And it's hard to look at Matt Stafford and Sean McVay and say they don't have a chance. But I do feel like if the Eagles bring their A game, and that's always the question, it feels like for the Eagles, there's a chance, I think, that this game could get out of hand. But the question is, do we trust this Eagles team? Jenks, I ran a poll for my teaser options, and I said, okay, so these are my 3 teaser legs. Bills plus 7.5, Chiefs minus 2.5, Eagles money line. Who ruins it? And the majority of the people said Eagles money line. So many people do not have faith in the Eagles to even win this game. It's wild to me because there's so many different outcomes, I think, for the Eagles. Like, is anybody going to be shocked if they beat the hell out of the Rams? No, because they have a really good offensive line. Saquon, if he gets going, is really hard to stop. And if Jalen Hurts gets that passing game going, like, this is the most complete team in football, if that's the case. So it feels like a game that I'm kind of afraid to play. But 6 points, again, it feels like a lot in the NFL. So what do you think the game plan is for the Rams to keep this one close?
Well, they've got to get the Eagles off the field. Because I agree that the Eagles are the more physical team, and they sort of bully ball you to death, right? And it's weird because what they want to do is they're kind of old school in that they want to dominate time of possession, they want to be the more physical team, and they want to hand the ball off to Saquon. And it's not the sexiest way to win, but they win. It's just that when you look at Jalen and when you look at their receivers, Devontae and AJ, you're like, wait, why aren't you guys just like scoring 40 points a game? Why aren't you doing what the Lions are doing? But that's not what they do. But if you're the Rams, you've got to get the Eagles off the field because they are so physical. The last thing you want is the Eagles to keep dominating, march down the field methodically. They play at a slow pace. They'll take their time. And then come late third quarter, early fourth, they start to lean on you. And then you're tired and you're worn out, and then the Eagles pull away. So the Rams have to keep the Eagles from these long, sustained drives so that they can hang with the Eagles for 4 quarters because you're right, they are the more physical team.
I also think that it's really important for the Rams to get off to a hot start because I feel like maybe that's the only pathway is when you go on the road and if you can do something to quiet the crowd, and obviously if you're going against a team that's really strong when it comes to the rush attack, if you make them throw the ball, maybe that's the pathway for the Rams, but much easier said than done. I'm not sure if the Rams can get it done, but if anybody can, feels like Matt Stafford is constantly surprising people. Their win total for this year, I think, was 8.5. I think it was plus money for them to make the postseason. So here they stand. So I don't know if you can sit here and doubt them again. But as far as bets go, maybe Saquon doesn't get, 255 rush yards. But I do feel like there's got to be a bet in there somewhere because we've seen it. The Rams have struggled to contain the run at times, and just about everybody struggles to contain Saquon Barkley. So I think the play for me is going to be his longest rush. 18.5 is the number juiced to the over. I believe it is minus 120. But I feel like Saquon against any defense is fully capable of breaking off a big run, and especially when he's running behind this offensive line.
Yeah.
So if this offensive line can get some push, which we saw in the first matchup, they certainly had the huge advantage over the Rams defensive line. I think he can break off a big run, and we've seen it. He's hit this number in 3 of the last 4 games. Almost got it against Green Bay as long as 17, but I think that's the play for me. I'm not going to go with the 111-yard rushing prop for Saquon. I'm simply going to go with his longest rush.
Yeah, I think that's a good play. And also, I think that you can sort of piggyback off of that a little bit if you think that, well, not just his longest rush, but if you think Saquon will have a big day based on his season, based on what he did against the Rams previously, maybe you go under the number of attempts for Jalen Hurts at quarterback, right? Because you know the Eagles' game plan is going to be handed off. If they don't have to throw, they won't. The receivers may not be happy about it. Eagles fans might not be happy about it. But if they can win this game by just keeping it on the ground, they will.
Yeah. Let's see what his attempts prop is, because I've played that before because that's been the bread and butter for the Eagles down. And I think a lot of it depends on if you think the Rams keep this close. Because if the Rams jump out to an early lead, the Eagles will have to throw the ball a little bit. So I'm not so sure. I think this one's just difficult for me because I feel like every time I fade the Rams, they pop up and they actually look good. And then every time I have my faith in them, aka that last game against the Eagles, I'm pretty sure I was on the Rams in that one. They looked terrible. But as far as Matt Stafford goes, if we're talking about quarterback props, maybe he's the guy you target. I was going to look at his pass attempts, 32.5. I think you hit the over there. The only sabotage factor is what you mentioned. The ball control by the Eagles can kill a lot of props for the Rams, simply because if they're not on the field that long, Matt Stafford isn't going to have the ability to throw it 33 times. But I do think of the Rams side, that's my favorite one. The passing attempts for Matt Stafford, 32.5. If you think they're playing from behind, I think this is how the Rams actually have a chance of beating the Eagles.
Yeah, I think that's a good play. And I think honestly though, I would rather bet on an Eagles player prop than on the Rams, just because of the sabotage factor you mentioned, which is, look, I absolutely think the Rams at some point will have to go to the air to catch up with the Eagles. But if the Eagles are dominating this game, will Matt Stafford get enough attempts late? I think that's the big question. So I don't mind it. I think the game script probably goes in that direction, but I do worry about time of possession for the Eagles.